Hey, house churches. So this is our house church video for this week. This past Sunday, we're looking at the second half of the Lord's Prayer. And so the first half that Nathan talked about 2 weeks ago was all about this kind of vertical component where we're looking at God and his kingdom in our lives. Really, that's the up part of our rhythm, looking at how we can bring God's kingdom into our world and into our lives. And this half of the prayer is really all about the horizontal, where the first half is all vertical between me and God. The second half is all about us being a part of a community, which would be your side component of our rhythm, and then a part of our actual world, which would be our down part of our rhythm. And so we're looking at the difference between these kind of ancient prayers that Jesus had based some of the Lord's Prayer on. This first half, that's all about the vertical. It is only about you and God and making yourself right with him and kind of trying to earn your way to heaven. Whereas now Jesus is flipping that a little bit and he's taking that and saying, yes, it's still about you and God, but it's actually about this side and this down component where we have to be engaged with other people and actually engaged with our world as well. So for me, as I was preparing this text, the question mark for me that came up was as I looked at the three components of this half of the prayer being asking for daily bread, asking for, forgiveness and giving forgiveness, and then dealing with temptation and the evil one in our lives. Really, the question mark that came up for me was, how am I in my own prayer life echoing these kind of prayers? What does my prayer life look like when I'm actually asking Jesus for the things that I need? What does my prayer life look like when it comes to forgiveness? Am I freely forgiving? Am I receiving forgiveness? What does that look like for me there? And then when it came to temptation and fending off the evil one, the question for me is like, how am I doing there? Am I actually actively engaging with the Holy Spirit on these things and fighting them off? Or am I just kind of letting it slide in my prayer life and not dealing with it? A light bulb moment for me was really, as I looked at some of the commentaries on this passage, that connection between the vertical and the horizontal that Jesus brings with this half of the prayer. So he moves from talking about his kingdom, this up reality that we are in relationship with God himself and want to maintain that relationship. And he moves immediately into our lives and our world and is saying, no, we need to be connected with each other and our world and make a difference there. And so that was just this big connection of the dots, so to speak, for me, where we saw this Old Testament pattern and that Jesus based this prayer on, but then he adds this horizontal component, this side and this down component, and it's just beautiful. Arrow for me, the conviction point for this for this passage was really just, as we talked about these kind of two ditches, and when we come to these prayers that we can talk about, one being where we make it overly easy on ourselves, or the other side where we are soul-crushingly difficult on ourselves. The conviction point for me was I realized for me and my personality, I very often been on that soul-crushing side of things where I kind of tend to fall into this religious spirit and this woe is me, like, I am the worst human being in the world. And that's not what Jesus has for me. He wants us to live in the party, right? He wants to live us on this narrow road where we can be refined and we can grow in him and who he wants us to be. So that was my conviction point is like, too often I dip into that ditch, but Jesus really wants me to be on that narrow road so I can be grown and refined. So that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us. Have a great discussion in your house church.